Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Are You Happy? The Meaning of Life During COVID-19 webinar, hosted by Drexel University Online and presented by Drexel's faculty, Dr. Eric Zilmer. My name is Reina Lopez, and I'll be moderating this presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping items. First, please click the icon of a raised hand if you can hear me. Okay, great. For questions, please use the area entitled Q&A. For comments or other concerns, please use the area titled Chat. We will do our best to get to everyone's questions. Lastly, we would want everyone to know that this presentation is being recorded and will be sent in a follow-up email. Now I would like to introduce to you today's presenter. Dr. Eric A. Zilmer is the Carl R. Pacifico Professor of Neuropsychology, Director of Athletics, and a licensed clinical psychologist at Drexel University, where he is the recipient of the 2019 Outstanding Faculty Award. And with that, I will hand it off to today's presenter, Dr. Zilmer.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have so many of you with us today, all across the states, and in fact, all across the globe. And well, are you happy? Today, we're going to talk about your happiness. And I understand it's difficult to be happy during COVID-19, but even resilient individuals feel out of sorts right now. But if you feel overwhelmed and anxious, sad, it's absolutely normal during these confusing times of uncertainty. It's not your fault, but it is your problem. I don't know about you, but I've hit the COVID wall. It's been 5 months of this crisis, and there's no end in sight. I've noticed that I've been walking through grocery stores, taking a hand sanitizer at every available opportunity. I've become scared of public bathrooms. In fact, aren't we supposed to be on vacation right now? We're really getting tired of masks, caution, directives. It's been really difficult for everybody, and it's really everybody. On a more cognitive level, I think it's harder to focus. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting tired easily, and I worry about my energy levels. This is really hitting the wall. We're not alone. Surveys suggest that 90% of all Americans are experiencing mental health issues as a result of the pandemic. And in fact, even former First Lady Michelle Obama admitted publicly last week that she's suffering from low-grade depression because of the pandemic quarantine. So mental health has gone mainstream. But stick around. I'm going to discuss with you today what we can do about it. I'm going to look at this pandemic and its mental health fallout through different lenses. First of all, I'm a neuroscientist, so I'm interested how the brain works, how do we manage stress, what choices do we have, and how has this pandemic affected us both cognitively and emotionally. But I'm also an athletic director, and I love sports, and I'm very competitive. And from sports, we've learned that how to prepare for a really formidable opponent, how to game plan, and how to deal with adversity. And so I'm also going to bring in some of the tactics that we have learned in competitive sports and how we can apply them to this pandemic. And finally, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm a healer. And especially right now, all of us need some TLC. And it's obvious that this crisis is spreading not only the virus, but also anxiety and fear, which is just as contagious, if not even more. For example, why do we feel so exhausted all the time? Why do people worry so much about wearing masks, about returning to work? I ask all of you to take time and check into your own lives and ask yourselves, am I okay? Normal anxiety can motivate us. It's actually manageable and sometimes welcomed. But excessive anxiety is cumulative, and the negative consequences tend to stick around for some time, even after the pandemic might be gone. So as a psychologist, I know that stress can break us. It can make us feel like victims, but also others emerge out of stressful experiences stronger than they were before. So how do we spring forward and not fall back? What proven coronavirus busters are there? What should be in your psychological first aid toolbox? So stick around. We're going to cover three areas today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychology of happiness. This has been a hot topic even before the corona pandemic. Then we're going to talk about why there's so much anxiety and stress surrounding the pandemic. And then we're going to look at fixes, look at the psychological first aid toolbox, things that can help you move forward and make you feel better about yourself and how you're facing all of this stress. So let's get cozy, pull up a chair, get some buttered popcorn, put another log on the fire. Let's talk about how you can get comfy in uncomfortable times. A good place to start is, of course, at the beginning, at least the beginning of our country. It was Thomas Jefferson who, in fact, right here in the city of Philadelphia, from which I'm broadcasting today, wrote the now famous words that every American has the basic right to the pursuit of happiness. It was here at the Graff House at 7th and Market Street where he rented a room together with his 14-year-old enslaved servant, Bob Hemmings, and wrote a draft of the Declaration of Independence. And in those words, what did he mean? Did he mean that every American has the right to pursue property and wealth? Essentially, we have the right to the American dream to go from poor to prosperous. Is it that simple? Can happiness be bought? Or did he think something more complex, something larger, that the pursuit of happiness is the expression of liberty and freedom? Let's take a look. So this is our first poll question. I invite you to participate. And the question, of course, reads, what did Thomas Jefferson mean? Did he mean that option one, that you have the right to be happy? That is, if this was baseball, you have the right to not only go to home plate, but you have the right to get to first base if none of the balls are in the strike zone. Or did he mean you only have the right, option two, to step up to the home plate and swing? Whether you hit or you miss, that's up to you. Option one is the entitlement to property and wealth. Option two, just the entitlement that you can give it a good try, that the opportunity is there for you. And while you answer the question, you can see also on this slide on the right side, that's the original copy of his draft. It was really a remarkable time, wasn't it? And a remarkable opportunity for our country to put things like this into writing. And it's so interesting to me that Thomas Jefferson wrote a draft that was corrected over 40 times. But as you can see, the pursuit of happiness was not messed with. Those words stuck. And I would suggest to you that for our country in the United States of America, it's really some of the most famous words that have been written. All right, as we move on, we'll wait for the poll. I'll take the next slide. Oh, here we go. The poll is option one, 17%, and option two, 84%. You can see it for yourself. So most of you feel he meant something larger, that the person, an American, has the right to pursue the opportunity, that the opportunity should be there, that our government might play a role in creating the opportunity, but not necessarily the wealth. So that's interesting. Now, what's the answer? Well, I don't know if that's the answer, because we truly do not know what Thomas Jefferson meant. And believe me, many scholars have looked into this piece of work. But Will Smith, famous Philadelphian actor, and you may not know this, philosopher, suggested that, Thomas Jefferson was a real poet because, he was slick because he put the pursuit back into happiness, and that puts it back on you. And so I would agree with the majority of you that he meant something larger, something the expression of liberty and happiness. So Thomas Jefferson taught us an important lesson, which is that happiness is not a place, but it's a direction. Since then, we've become obsessed with happiness. Our culture has. We eat Happy Meals. We listen to music. Don't Worry, Be Happy became a #1 hit. And of course, the great modern icon, the smiling yellow happy face. Every day we use it in our social media. This is not probably what Jefferson had in mind. I taught a class at Drexel in the past and also this fall called Happiness. It was sold out in 10 minutes. Even 18 to 20-year-olds want to find out how they can be happier in their lives. So we've been told as an American culture since 1776 to be happy on command. Of course, psychologists have studied happiness, and the first person to really do so systematically was Abraham Maslow. And it's really remarkable because psychologists up until then, including Sigmund Freud and his disciples, were more interested in pathology, like what can go wrong with a person. And Abraham Maslow, for the first time in our history, really looked at what could go right with a person. It's now called positive psychology or humanistic psychology, but I call it the psychology of happiness. So in this model that Maslow created, he created a model of happiness that is a stage model. It looks like a mountain, like a pyramid, and you can actually think of it as climbing a mountain, a journey, happiness being a journey. And so at the bottom of the mountain, which is more easily accessible, Maslow put things that make you happy, but they're more physiological in nature. They deal with hunger, thirst, sleep. And yes, Maslow put sex in as a basic need at that level, at the base, like base camp. But as you move higher in the hierarchy, he also had more complex forms of happiness. For example, the need for friendship and family, work, and love. The most aspirational form of happiness, as Maslow suggested, was at the very top of the pyramid, what I call above the tree line. If you're in Colorado right now or in the Rocky Mountains, and I grew up in the mountains, you know what it's like to be above the tree line. It's beautiful. The air is better. There's less people. It's divine, right? And in fact, many temples are always built above the tree line. And so he suggested to get above the tree line, you'd have to really be at peace with yourself and others. And he also argued that very few people would ever get there. He called it that self-actualization. So this journey of happiness that Maslow suggested, this model, is a little bit like a hike up a mountain. And he felt that happiness really is more of a sprint, but that finding meaning in life to get to the top of the mountain and find inner happiness is more of a marathon. Of course, mind you that during COVID-19, our basic needs have been replaced with finding toilet paper and having reliable Wi-Fi. But you get the point, which is that Maslow argued that it's different, there's a different happiness to get a promotion than to eat a pound of spaghetti. Full transparency, that's not my picture. I found that on the internet. So psychologists, we do things, one thing we do well is we measure behavior well. We're behavioral scientists. So we learned how to measure happiness. In fact, you might go into an emergency room and they may hand you a tablet like that, and you can circle the one you feel that is most consistent with your level of happiness at the moment. So as we were measuring happiness, we found out what's the least happy job in our country. Well, it's a gas station attendant and roofers. And also, what's the happiest job in our lives? It happens to be architects, firefighters, and actors. We also learned that seniors are happier than younger people. We learned that Republicans are happier than Democrats. And we also learned that married couples with children are happier than single parents with children. So you could measure happiness. And of course, happiness means different things to different people. For example, if you look at different languages, of these 3 languages, I only speak one of them. So I don't speak Greek, but we think happiness in Greek means really being a good citizen, having good conduct, virtue. and then I don't speak Armenian, but it looks like in Armenian, happiness means to be successful. But I do speak German, and in German, happiness means glücklich, and that clearly means to be lucky. So in Germany, to be happy means also to be lucky, you know. So it's interesting how all of that is a little bit more personal and also cross-cultural. Not only have we looked at what's the happiest job in the country, but also what's the happiest country in the world. And you probably are not surprised that it happens to be Norway, Iceland, Denmark, Finland. Those countries, everybody seems to be happy. They're smaller and they're European. What's the unhappiest country in the world? Afghanistan, war-torn Afghanistan. I hope my friend from Montevideo is watching, Marcel. He said he would. Uruguay is the happiest country in South America. Venezuela has the biggest drop in happiness. How do they measure this? Well, of course, wealth has a lot to do with it, but also the perceived corruption. So, for example, the highest country that has perceived corruption is Somalia, and the lowest is Denmark. How are Americans doing? Well, according to this chart, which is a couple years old, it's we're 14th in the world. But actually, we slipped down to 18th. Soon we'll be relegated to another league. You know, so as Americans are getting wealthier, we're also becoming unhappier. And so here's our question number 2, and that is, can happiness be bought? I mean, we're a wealthy country, and wealth plays an important role in how happy you can be, or does it? So here, please fill out, can happiness be bought? Your first instinct is probably the best way to answer that question. And so I'll move on now. We'll get the tallies a little later. Up there they are. So 23% say yes, and 77% say no, you can't buy happiness. Well, it's interesting. I mean, so most of you agree with the Beatles, money can't buy you love. But if you look at the next slide, there's probably some way that money does play a role in happiness, especially at the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy. I mean, you can buy food. You can buy safety. A lot of people are buying guns now. We're assuming that makes them happy. But can you buy a happy family life, or can you buy internal happiness? Probably not. However, you know, most people who have higher income report being happier. That's what the research shows. And there's one little trick how money can make you happy, and which I'll tell you right now, which is you give money to other people. And so if they've done some research with 2-year-olds giving goldfish to other people, and they rather take it from their own stash than from somebody else's stash, it makes them happier. And so it is for adults. So if you really want to reach really high levels of happiness, it's possible with money, which is to buy something for somebody else, and or donate money to your charity. You know, so that's another form of happiness that involves money. But by and large, I would agree with you. Money is not the answer. Let's take a look at neuroscience. You know, as a neuropsychologist, I wonder where in the brain is happiness. And the way I like to think of the brain is like an old house. It has a lot of different rooms. There's the old part of the house, the cellar. You know, bad things happen down there. We don't want to really go there. A little further up, where we monitor our emotions, and then the most recent evolutionary structure is our cortex, where we actually can think. So the brain is an incredibly interesting, complicated biological organ, and happiness has to be expressed through the brain. So how do we figure it out? Well, when you look at it, and the fact that the brain has so many rooms, like a big house, a big complex hotel with different rooms and different floors, it's clear that there are not one, but many different forms of happiness centers in our brain. So you can experience happiness in many different ways. The other thing we learned is that happiness and sadness are activated by several large complex neuronal networks. It's the same neuronal network. So that means that you can't be happy and sad at the same time. And so it makes sense, wouldn't it, then to work and train yourself on being happier, which is incompatible with being sad. So, the important thing here is that our brain also allows us to be aware of how happy we are. So not only is happiness in different parts of our brain, and we can't be happy and sad at the same time, we have the ability as humans to evaluate our own happiness. And can we make changes to it? Yes, because there's a structure in our brain called the frontal lobes. I call it the penthouse of this new house, the most recent addition, all the way at the top, the most complex form of cortical circuitry that we have. And as being the conductor, it can change your behavior if you want to. And so you may not feel like it, but you do have a choice. You have a choice between happiness and fear. And so today we'll talk about how you can make some of those choices happen. So if you superimpose the neurological brain, the biology over the psychology, it's interesting that actually it fits perfectly. At the lower part of this brain house, you have more hardwired ways of becoming happy, which are the physiological needs, food, sleep, eating. But as you move higher, they become more complicated. At the highest level, the self-actualization, you becoming at peace with yourself and others, your frontal lobes, the highest level of cortical circuitry is involved. And that is not hardwired. That you have to earn. So just a summary, there is not one happiness center in the brain, but many. Some places where happiness is processed in the brain are hardwired. You take drugs, certain drugs, you take certain foods, or certain things that feel just great, right? And others, though, are under your voluntary control. So you can choose to be happy. Let's turn our attention to anxiety during COVID-19. It's been a major mental health challenge. I believe it's part and parcel of the medical issues that we're dealing with, the virus, and that anxiety is just as contagious as the virus itself. So the next slide, why are we so anxious all the time, deals with the fact that we are always in what biologists would call the fight or flight response. And so this prepares us, our biological circuitry, to act quickly. For example, you're driving down the street in your car and somebody just cuts in front of you. You drop your coffee, you hit the brake pedal, and you're able to avoid this oncoming car. Your fight response was just activated. It allows you to respond quickly, it increases your heart rate, and you are ready to deal with any emergency. But can you imagine this happens to you at every intersection? You're going to be a mess, right? So we are not really equipped to have a fight response all the time. It's really meant to be and welcomed to be once in a while. It puts us into a situation where we have a life or death decision to make. But now, since 5 months, we're watching the news and everything is about life or death. And we're just hearing bad things. And so we're constantly in a fight or flight state. We as humans are not equipped to deal with these extensive periods of stress over long times. And so what are we going to do? How can we get out of this fight-flight response? And since, I'm a athletic director, I'll give you a sports analogy. The Flyers are playing right now. They're in the quarterfinals in Canada. And just imagine being a goalie and you have a breakaway and the puck comes at you or in a shootout. Well, the goalie really has to pay attention, like flight or fight. That puck is going to come at them 100 miles an hour. But then after they save that puck, they save the shot, it moves on again. But can you imagine being constantly peppered with ice hockey pucks every 5 seconds? That's what COVID-19 has done to us. We are not being allowed to recuperate, and we feel like we're constantly in a stressful situation. So as we, pre-COVID-19, we experienced stress, of course, but it was manageable, and sometimes it's welcome because stress under normal circumstances motivates us to complete a project, to go grocery shopping, to be on time. But when stress accumulates, it adds up. So two stressful situations make a bigger stressful situations. And then there comes a tipping point. When you're going to the grocery store, you're going to the ATM machine and no money comes out, the grocery store is closed. All of a sudden, you're like really beyond feeling good about yourself and what's going on. That's what prolonged stress does to you. And it's contagious. So when you're around other people who feel like that, you can't help but feel anxious yourself. This is a national issue, and I've done a lot of work on this, and the media is very interested in trying to understand why we're so exhausted. For example, caution fatigue. Almost all Americans are being confronted with an ambiguous, complex problem-solving situation. Zoom fatigue, like we're doing right now, I don't recommend doing more than 4 or 5 hours of it. It's real. You have to fill in the gaps. I'd rather talk to you in person. And that requires cognitive energy to look at a screen and piece it all together. Luckily, we have a PowerPoint slides to facilitate that, but you get tired more quickly. Or, if it was just one thing, we could fix it. But it's a lot of different things that are coming together. It's politics, it's science, it's your community, it's your spouse, it's everything. And so it's really cognitively difficult for our brains to manage. On top of that, we've been told what? Go home, shelter it in place. And that's where you're the safest. But now we're told to go back to work. Well, hold on, we were supposed to be at home, that's safe, but now work is safe. So a lot of people are resisting getting back to work. They feel victimized. That's not fair. I've stayed inside for 5 months. The virus should be gone by now. We flattened the curve. So I can't get sick, right? And young people, they don't think the COVID-19 virus can hurt them. So part of what we're dealing with, folks, is also not only an emotional situation, it's a cognitive situation. We are really processing information, and it's all new to us. We've never been in a situation like that. The first thing your brain does in any situation is try to make sense of it. And so if you're operating from uncertainty, your brain has to fill in the gaps. That's really taxing because we don't have all the pieces to the puzzle of what's happening. And in addition, we're getting different directives from our local government, from our state government, from our federal government, even from our employer. And on top of that, we're also asked to be socially distant and socially isolating ourselves. And we can't process this information together as humans. It's called social processing. It all puts us into really a very difficult situation, as if we're solving 5 crossword puzzles at the same time. We're constantly trying to figure out what's going on. But how can we fix this? How can we get around this? What have psychologists done in the past to deal with situations like that and come up with some solutions that you and I can use to manage this situation? I turn first to the military. I've been fortunate to be the son of a West Point officer, and as a result, I've been an Army brat and grown up all over the world, and I've gotten so much interested in the topic that I actually published a book called Military Psychology. And so I know firsthand that in the military, they've studied prolonged stressful situations, like under battle conditions, so to speak, battlefield scenarios. And it's well known from that research that when you're stressed or when you're tired, your cognitive performance diminishes. and also that there's emotional consequences for you to be exposed to stress for a long time. So the military has put an amazing amount of money and research into this idea about how can we protect our soldiers from these experiences, like you see in the picture Afghanistan, which I used for the cover of our book. And so they've done a lot of research on this, and they came up with one ingredient that they feel if they can teach this or give this to their soldiers, they'll be more protected from stress, less tired, more coherent, and have a better overall experience, even in battlefield conditions. What is that one ingredient? It's resiliency. And resiliency allows people to deal with stress. And few people are really that resilient that they can manage everything. Even fully resilient people right now are struggling, but they do have tools in their psychological toolbox to manage the situation. Now, while everybody needs to have support, resiliency adds to that and gives you cognitive strategies how to manage things. So as a result, the military, they actually teach people how to be prisoners of war, how to be captive, how to work without sleep. So we've learned a lot from the military, which will incorporate it in some of the fixes. The other area that I've learned how people to deal with stress is in athletics. I mean, goodness, when you're playing a basketball game, the people with the other shirts, the other color, they want to destroy you. They want to win by a lot, right? So you have to prepare and game plan and deal with, adversity, and you're preparing for a formidable opponent, very much like COVID. COVID's a formidable opponent. And so when you look at what the ingredient is for successful teams, for individuals who win a trophy, a gold medal, what are the top athletes? What ingredient do they have to have? Otherwise, they will not be able to win or compete at the highest level. What is that one ingredient? It's trust. And so the idea that you're not only trusting each other, but that you're also trusting yourself, that you can manage this. And when you do that, then happiness actually, you're open to it, and it becomes contagious. So just like the virus, which is interrupting your biology, happiness is actually contagious as well, but it strengthens your immune system, and it makes you feel better about everything that you're experiencing in the world, including this pandemic. Resiliency and trust. Recently, I've gotten interested in people who live forever. They just seem to have forgotten how to die. It's called blue zones. You may have seen it on television. Why should we be interested in that? Well, A, I'm at home a lot and I'm watching a lot of television. And B, I'm thinking, like, if you lead a long, happy, disease-free life, your immune system has been boosted. And I would like to look at what are these people eating? What's their lifestyle like? And what are the ingredients that makes them feel like that? And so when you look at the blue zones, there are 5 of them. And I ask you to check them out. It's really interesting. And I think you can look what people are doing there. And it's not one thing, of course, it's many different things. And you can incorporate them or adapt them into your own life. And you can see where they are in Nicaragua, California, Sardinia, Italy, Greece, and Okinawa, Japan. So for the rest of the webinar, I want to focus on what we have learned from the military, from sports, from the blue zones, and what have I learned as a clinical psychologist, a therapist, in trying to deal with this pandemic psychologically. And I would go back to the military. I do believe that the resiliency is part and parcel in dealing with this pandemic. And so This is so important that we can like find ways to boost our resiliency. You see, it can be trained. You can do this. You can learn some resiliency skills and you will feel better and you will be happier and healthier. And this is so important for your mental health now, but also we've learned from science that when you don't manage this now, and we put the coronavirus into the rearview mirror, that you will not emerge healthy, because we'll all have to reintegrate into whatever life will look like once we have a vaccine and we've reduced the threat of the coronavirus. But we have to reintegrate post-COVID and not feel victimized that something was taken away from us, that this was such a bad time. If we can manage that, we'll come out forward, we'll feel better about ourselves, and we'll come out stronger, healthier, and ready to move on. So in this resiliency skill development, and of course, it's important to bring the dog along. Have you adopted a dog? That should have been another question. I bet you 25% of you have adopted a dog. Or have you started gardening, cooking, cleaning? So the dog's important on this journey in this VW van, but the ingredients that I think are important as well are in order of magnitude in terms of how you can go about them, are physical things you can do to your body, cognitive, how you think, social, how you interact with others, emotional, and also spiritual, which might be surprising. Let's unpack these 5 things. Let's see what we have to pack in our suitcase to go on this trip in the VW microbus with our puppy. All right, so this is a lot. I understand that. And you can take a screenshot of this so you have it, or you can also look at the video again. But the first thing you need to consider is that when you're in an airplane and the oxygen masks come down, which means there's been a compromise in the air system of the plane, you have to they're asking you to put the oxygen mask on first before you help others, like your child or loved one. Okay, this is true for psychological first aid during the COVID crisis. You have to take care of yourself first. Otherwise, you can't take care of anybody else. That's true for me too. I'm a teacher and I got to take care of myself. Otherwise, I'll be useless this fall in teaching a class. And one way to do that is to follow some physical regimens. That is to, monitor how much you sleep. You have more time on your hands, perhaps, so make sure you sleep well. To also, of course, eat well, and eat nourishing foods and engage in self-care behavior, like, get your hair done, see if you can find a safe place to get a pedicure or do it yourself. I guarantee you, if you do these physical things, you will feel great and you will look great. And that includes, of course, exercise. I know it's hard to get up and exercise, but I told you, your frontal lobes, you do have the biological capacity to do so, and you will feel great. Now, we've learned from the blue zones, by the way, that they all exercise, even moderately, every day. Now, they don't jump on Peloton bikes or treadmills. They do what I call purposeful physical movement. They walk all the time, up and down, back and forth to work, to the grocery store, to their friends. But you can mimic that. You can walk. Walking is a great exercise, and see if you can't walk to some things that you would have driven to before. So purposeful physical movement. So that's the first part. Take care of yourself. Put on your own oxygen mask. Get your stuff together first. And that includes a lot of physical things. Schedule your day for time for exercise. The next step is a little more complicated, and that is cognitive. And the idea here is, like my mentor and friend Carl Pacifico said, is to think better and you will feel better. And here you can do some simple cognitive, I mean, you're smart. I mean, we're the smartest species on this planet. Use it. Schedule your day. If you don't like what's happening, do a reset, just like you do on your computer, and start scheduling your day. You know, everything you're doing, or many things you're doing, you should be goal oriented. They should have a purpose. You know, you have to be optimistic. You don't have to be wildly optimistic. You can be cautiously optimistic, but nobody wants to be around a person who is negative. So you have to be positive and do things that are creative. You know, many of you, I just had a friend who just bought a guitar and he's doing guitar lessons. It will make you feel really good about yourself. And finally, you know, the controllability. You know, Michael Jordan, in this documentary, The Last Dance, talked about, you know, I've never worried about a shot I have not taken, and pointing to the fact that, you know, I wish somebody would have told me that during my basketball career, because I was always afraid. And athletes deal with uncertainty all the time, right? I mean, from the free throw line, they shoot about 70%. So they don't know if the ball is going to go in or not. They are okay with uncertainty. You know, you think it's going to go in. And so it's the same thing in your regular life. You know, control the things that you think you're going to have a chance controlling. And the others, you can't control anyway. So you shouldn't, like the Dalai Lama said, you can't worry about things you can't control. The next one is social. And that's an important one, because we were asked to be socially distancing ourselves. You know, they used the wrong words. They should have said physically distancing themselves, because it has nothing to do with social, but now we're all thinking we're socially isolated. You know, this was used to be a form of punishment, to be isolated in prison. You know, I grew up in Europe, and they would ask us to stand in the corner if we were a bad boy. Or you might even do this with your kids. You know, you get a timeout. It's kind of a social distancing, social isolation. It's really inherently unpleasant. We're truly a social species. So because of that, we have to now over communicate with each other. We really have to nurture our social support network. You know, I grew up in Europe, and we established a WhatsApp account with all of my high school grads. We haven't done this for 30, 40 years, but now we have. It's so important now to reach out to your family and to your loved ones and the people that you know. One thing that's missing is for us to sit around and process information socially. It's so important to get those nuances and to understand, like from each other's body language, how we feel about certain things. It's hard to do, but you could do it. You could have a dinner with your friends and be socially distant and wear masks and make sure you're safe. And it would be really healthy to do that. And then one of the most important things is to also take care of your community and your neighbors. And it just makes everybody feel better. And it makes you feel more connected, that you feel like you have a base and that you're not on slippery ice. The next area, emotional area, and we'd ask you to be honest with yourself. And that's harder than all of the other ones. And the idea would be to trust the process. You know, that's what we say, you know, the 76ers, the verdict is out yet, our basketball team, trust the process. We're going to win a championship, but the fact that you trust yourself, believe in yourself, and the fact that there will be a vaccine, that we're going to move through this, and that's really important. Another important thing is emotionally to be grateful, and I've seen so many people now really, you're not sweating the small stuff, and really being grateful for small things though. For example, today's my birthday, and I've really never celebrated my birthday. But I'm really grateful to be alive, to be with you. I'm going to head for the beach afterwards and just enjoy my day and the fact that I'm alive. So this idea about being grateful is really wonderful, a wonderful psychological tool that builds resiliency. By the way, the Marines all figured this out, okay? They communicate with each other. They're grateful for being with each other. You know, they're in physical shape. You know, the Marines, you may think of them as you know, like not somebody who'd be like, you know, but be motivated by philosophy, but they are. And then the final one, as we wrap up here, and then I'd love to take your questions, is spiritual and the meaning of life. And this seems like an odd one, doesn't it? Because right now we're dealing with a crisis. We're worried about getting milk and eggs. And so why is it important to have an attempt to live a full and meaningful life? And why is that important to be a part of your psychological first aid? Well, for several reasons. Number one, in the blue zones, every group that lived, forever, they were faith-based. Okay, some were Catholics, other believed in another God. And when I say spirituality, I don't mean necessarily religion, but it helps to believe in something, that you have meaning in your life. And quite frankly, I think everybody is searching for that anyway. With COVID, it's gotten more difficult. So when my students come back this fall semester, I got to make sure that my class has meaning for them in their lives, because they're searching for that too. And that's an amazing way to restore your energy levels by trying to find purpose in the things that you do. So in a way, it makes sense, right? When I'm asking you to work out purposefully, have a motivation or purpose, have a rhyme or reason behind it, I'm also asking you to, when you put your life together in a more spiritual form, that it has also a purpose to it. And so that if you do that, then you feel you have a sense of belonging, that you're at peace with yourself. You might find that things that have bothered you for a long time before COVID, that you're now able to take and look at and maybe even drag over the finish line. So it's surprising, isn't it? I see many of my friends, including myself, that the COVID pandemic has created this opportunity to also find extra meaning and spirituality in your life, even during a crisis. All right, so one of the areas that people really worry about is managing return to work anxiety. I mean, we've come such a long way, but now we need to go back to, we got to go back to work. A couple points about that. If you're involved in this, I think as a manager, you're going to have to be really like a psychologist. You have to be compassionate. You have to be flexible. You have to engage in what I call active listening. You really want to pay attention to your coworkers. Remember, anxiety is contagious, and it's not possible to be anxious and creative at the same time. That's why athletes who want to perform at the highest level have to be relaxed. They can't be creative. A couple more things about managing return to work anxiety, which is, there are things that work. Masks, the research on masks is just so clear now. They work. More and more science is coming out that they do protect others from contracting the virus, and and social distancing protects you from contracting it. Hand washing and cleaning, and to problem solve, be patient and flexible. So as I wrap up today, I want to convince you that this crisis has really actually created an opportunity for us to reevaluate one's priorities in life, and as a result, find happiness in unexpected way. A couple examples. This is the Barcelona Opera House. They're not allowed to have, of course, an audience because of COVID. But these musicians, they've been put out of work. All their gigs have been canceled into 2021 overnight. But they decided to have a chamber music quartet and play to plants. And something new, 2,000 plants. Some people say it's unbelievable. All right, I know. I can't see you, but it was a bad joke. But then they donated the plants to people that they thought to their under-resourced population in Barcelona. Or my friend Bill Kannengeiser, who is a star, a Grammy Award-winning guitar player, who wrote me. I asked him, how's this affecting you? And he told me, I lost all my income. And I said to him, what is there a silver lining? He says, absolutely. I mean, I've now not take the gift of music for granted, and I really savor it when I return. And then finally, I mean, I'm so grateful to be involved with students, and I learn so much. I feel I learn more from them than they learn from me. And in my class, in my happiness class, Devin, this was my final, to have them write a haiku poem. And she wrote, always remember, life has ups and life has downs. Appreciate both. So as I wrap up, I want to summarize that again, happiness is a direction. It's not a place that you go to. It's something that you have to find within yourself and then go for it. And that the pursuit is the key tactic, and that happiness can be contagious. I have a TEDx talk. If you just Google TEDx happiness, you can also watch it. And many of the same things I talked about today are also in that TEDx talk. I want to dedicate this talk to my friend and mentor, Carl Pacifico. Follow me, please, on my Twitter handle, GoDragonsAD. All the graphics, or many of them, have you seen, are by my daughter, Kanya. I really appreciate her work. And I really want to thank all the Drexel University online team. You all have been so creative, and you've been so terrific, and I appreciate you allowing me to do this. And if you're looking for me, you'll know where to find me, above the tree line. So thank you very much. And now that concludes the presentation. Let's see if we have time for questions and answers.
Thank you, Dr. Zoomer. We do have a couple of questions here for you. First question, how do we balance the tone the media sets and how people take that to be quote unquote real, as opposed to our circle of interest and or influence?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the media is a problem right now because they have to sensationalize everything. Otherwise, they don't get the eyeballs that they need to support their sponsors. And so I would ask you to limit how much media you would want to look at every day in terms of managing your own information intake, because the truth is, you know it's bad, and you know it's always the same. You know, I watched the news the other day, and it was like 6 stories about COVID before it turned to something else. And so I would really urge you to say, like, okay, I'll watch it for 20 minutes. And that's it. Because if you're doing it for 4 or 5 hours a day, you're in this fight flight response that because you're looking at it and your body's thinking a car's going to pull out in front of you at any moment. And so that's the problem with the media.
My mom is claustrophobic. How can someone like her deal with the stress of being locked up at home during the lockdown?
Yeah, and I'm also reading a chat response. Plants love music. Thank you for that. I love that from Cynthia. Yeah, well, being at home creates all kinds of problems, which is that you feel like you're cooped up. And also a lot of people have just the opposite, agoraphobia, which is they don't want to leave the home. And so, agoraphobia and claustrophobia, they're all part of the same family of anxiety disorders. And anxiety disorders have been the #1 mental health problem in America before COVID-19. So as a nation, we like to respond with anxiety. And so now under stress, it's clear that that we're ready to be more anxious, not less anxious. So a lot of this, so the #1 symptom is among Americans with COVID-19, the mental health response is anxiety in different forms, generalized, or in this case, claustrophobia. I mean, I have to say, if you feel like this is an issue that is prolonged and it interferes with your social occupational function, you have to see a professional mental health, expert. Having said that, any of the things that I talked to today they're like an antibiotic to anxiety. All of these things reduce it. So you don't have to attack the claustrophobia itself, but you can make people feel comfortable about other things, physically, cognitively, emotionally, spiritually, the things I've talked about. So you don't have to address, when you have an anxiety, like I have an anxiety of heights. I mean, I know. So the last thing I need to hear is it's safe, But if somebody says let's do some breathing exercises, you want a cup of tea, work out, feel better better about yourself. Those things do help. So all the things I just told you are really all great antidotes for anxiety.
What do you think about meditation as a strategy to build resilience?
Yeah, fantastic. I should have talked more about it. I mean, I only have 60 minutes. Mindfulness gets you to this place where you're more spiritual and you're more focusing on the moment. And again, you know, the Marines studied that. They put millions of dollars into being in the moment, because you can imagine that if you're in combat, you want to be in the moment. But hey, if you want to be in real life, you want to be in the moment. And so if you worry about the past, it makes you feel depressed. If you have regrets, if you worry about the future, it makes you anxious. So more and more, we have to be able to learn how to be in the present. And that's true for athletics. I mean, you can't worry about the last play or whether you're going to win. You have to be in the moment. And those are the best athletes. And it's the best humans. It's a great resiliency tool. So I would urge all of you to figure out how to do that. You know, there's of course meditation, yoga, there's online mindfulness classes. You know, I've started journaling where you can write in, you know, things about happiness I write down so I can remember them, and it creates a sense of being in the present. It's a great skill. Thank you for that question. I didn't do it justice, but I didn't want to make this into a yoga class. But absolutely, it's an important tool in your psychological first aid kit, and you can learn it. You can learn how to be mindful.
How do you break the routine of being unhappy? So many cannot get off the couch to start being productive.
I know it seems hard, which is it's part of the problem, you see. And I guess I can give you a couple strategies. I like the idea of doing a reset. You know, when your computer freezes, you hit the power button or whatever we do, and we reset it. Sometimes we actually have to reload the operating system. You can do that. I mean, you really can. And then the other thing is you can also announce it publicly, you know. So, you know, I haven't lost weight in the last 20 years. And this COVID-19 crisis, because I want to take care of myself, I announced to other people, I'm going to lose weight. And so when you announce things to other people, like I'm going to be more active, I'm going to go for a walk every day, then you also have to live up to that. And I can tell you, I've lost 15 pounds so far, and I'm still going. So this crisis makes me feel really good about myself. It's how crisis works if you make it work for you. I mean, mind you, the best rock and roll songs were always written out of conflict, right? War, protest. Yeah, every country song is about somebody breaking up with somebody. They're not writing great hits, number one hits, when everybody's at peace with themselves. So it's okay to sit on the couch and feel like you're out of it, but you can change it with your frontal lobes. You can reset, announce to other people you're going to do A, B, and C, and then go ahead and do it. And you can also chart it. And once you're doing it, it's going to be self-fulfilling. So it's the first step is the hardest.
Do you feel that happiness is pursued differently in Europe than in America? In what ways could we learn from each other?
Yeah, totally. It's very personal also to a culture. And my students kind of rebelled in my happiness class because they told me I'm teaching a I'm teaching a first world class. You know, what's happiness mean in America? And so we called a recent graduate from Guyana, which is in South Africa, and I would say it's South America, and it's a developing country. And we asked her, like, what in the capital of Georgetown, Guyana, what does happiness mean to people there? And she said, well, talking to people, having dinners with them, we're playing in the streets, we don't have a lot of money, we have a lot of corruption, but it's really a kind of simple way of life that you would like to aspire to and that you see in the blue zones. So yeah, there are cross-cultural differences, and I think we have to learn from those. You know, I mean, in Europe, since you mentioned Europe, and I lived in Europe for 18 years, they manage work a little bit differently. They don't go all out, you know. They have a lot of structure to their social life, like tea in the afternoon and coffee and cake. And so but they're also an older country. They've been working on this for a long time. We in America are a younger country. We really value our freedom. We resent authority. And so So I feel like this is a great country. I wouldn't be doing this happiness webinar in Germany. I can do this in America because that's how we think. But I think we can learn a lot from other cultures, and we can incorporate those into our daily life. I mean, just having a cup of tea in the afternoon is a really great tradition, and it happens to be, British or Asian.
Do the 5 skills categories match the Maslow's 5 hierarchies?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. It probably I didn't do it like that, but yes, I would say yes. That that you have to, and remember the Maslow hierarchy is one form of happiness. It's like a stage model. Like you remember those Saturn rockets that went to the moon. The first stage was a big rocket, and then they jet. You have to get through the stage to get to the next level. So that's a good question. Do you buy that? Do you buy that you have to go through? Can you be self-actualized and be hungry or not fulfilled? Physiologically. So I do feel that they do match that. So I appreciate you pointing that out. And it's probably the journey I'm asking you to take is to from the bottom of the mountain up.
What's the difference between happiness and joy?
Yeah, that's a good question. There, I, I'm not a linguist. I'm bilingual. I probably have dyslexia. So words are interesting, aren't they? So to me, joy is something that's more internal. And happiness is probably the wrong word. And, I think it captures people. I really appreciate all of you participating today, and I hope you got something out of it. But if I would have called it positive psychology, half of you would not have, signed on. Happiness is something we can relate to, and it's something tangible, but I feel it's a little bit more like a French fry. And you eat it and you feel good, but it's not sustainable. And I do think happiness is not the ultimate goal, in life. I think it's meaning to have a meaningful life. And I think joy is further up on that journey as well. I think it's a more of an internal feeling of being at one with the world. So I would give it a higher level of sophistication. But I mean, it's not a class here, but that's exactly what we do at Drexel in the classroom. It's like what do you think?
Our last question, can you tell us your thoughts about how you were living above the tree line?
Well, I love that. I don't think I get enough paid to answer that question. So, well, that's a tough question. Thank you for that. Well, that's a mythical place above the tree line. I mean, it does exist. If you go hiking, what I mean. I would encourage you to do that, or skiing. But it's a sense of peace that you reach with yourself and nature that allows you to be at this sacred intersection. And so that's what I mean with that. And that's me talking. And that's not Maslow, by the way. So I'm very what we call existential in that sense. But I do feel like, we need to find an inner peace with ourselves, like a more complicated form of oxygen that not only fills our lungs, but it fills our soul. And when you go above the tree line, I feel like you are now searching for something in your soul. And if you're doing it the right way, it can be a beautiful thing and make you a better parent, a better employee, a better citizen. So I do think it's an aspirational place to be. But mind you, there's not as much oxygen up there. And if you go really high, like Mount Everest, you can't stay there for long. So I do like the metaphor, and I hope it meant something to you. So again, Drexel University online team, thank you for hosting me. Reina, thank you for moderating the discussions. I hope all of you received something out of this, that it was worth your while. I know that during COVID-19, people are busy, so like surprisingly busy, busier than ever. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and spend an hour with us talking about happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zomer, and thank you all for joining us today. A special thanks for taking your time to share your expertise with us, Dr. Zomer. Everyone have a great day.